The future of TJ Oshie on the Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen or view of the day. Yes, this podcast is also available in video form, so head on over to YouTube and check it out. My name is Dan Holney. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about one of the favorites, TJ Oshie, and what is the future of TJ Oshie on the Capitals. We'll weigh out the pros, we'll weigh out the cons, and we'll hear what TJ Oshie himself has to say about his future. But just to get it going here, that's where we'll start, is TJ Oshie himself. What does he think his future is? Let's face it, he is a guy that plays much bigger than he is. I think that is oftentimes why he is susceptible to injury, and he is injured quite often. And one of my biggest cases, I guess I would say, for moving on from him is he is prone to being injured. And there's also been, a slight decline in his numbers. But as far as a leader, you won't find a better leader or a guy that is more liked in the locker room than TJ Oshie. And just pure athleticism, he is outstanding. One of the things, just seeing him play live a couple of times, you see what kind of playmaker he is. If there is a scoring opportunity to be had, he is involved in it, and that is one of the things that the Caps would miss. But one of the things that I'm kind of highlighting this summer is the pieces that potentially might have to move out of DC in order to make this team more younger and viable in the future. He is a bit of a lightning rod. Anytime I bring him up on this show, people are like, there's no way that you could move on from TJ Oshie. We love him here, and I love him here too. But this team needs to start its transition into the next phase. I know there's not going to be a tear it down to the studs rebuild while Alex Ovechkin is here, but it is starting to move in that direction. So on breakdown day, the man himself, what did TJ Oshie said? TJ Oshie, who was sidelined 3 times this season due to a wonky back, had a minor procedure on his back to alleviate the discomfort. The 36-year-old winger said he's optimistic that he'll now be able to have a normal summer of training for the first time in years. And he is a guy that's been plagued by injuries pretty much every season that he's been on the Caps. He's missed at least some time due to injury. Why? Because he likes to get involved in the thick of it. It doesn't matter if he's taking on a guy that's much bigger than him. He is going to take him on because he is a competitor at the end of the day. And that's one of the things that I truly love about his game. So we would miss that. What he had done was called a double ablation. It's called, Oshie said of the procedure. I already feel light years different than I did before I had the procedure. So that's good news from moving forward. My training regimen is going to be a lot different this year, a lot more focused on core strength. If you guys remember last season, he had a procedure done to take care of a core issue. Kind of a vague thing to say, but he had a core procedure done. So he has a history of having procedures done. So he's going to work on his core strength and conditioning for next season. He said, typically my training can't really begin until August, and by then I'm just playing catch up. So it's a big opportunity for me to come back and look a little bit more than I did 4 or 5 years ago and have a full season without my back setting me back. And that's one of the things that has bothered him for the longest time, is back issues, kind of lingering back issues. Oshie spoke about how he feels the Caps let the fans down. And he was just kind of talking about the season. And one of the things, I saw evident across a lot of the players, but on Oshie in particular, is they know what Caps fans expect. They expect a winning product out on the ice. And you could really see it on Oshie's face that he feels like he let the fans down. The Caps overall let the fans down. And there's this feeling to prove to themselves and to the Caps fans that they still have it. And I like that he takes on that responsibility, that he's not like, well, we all didn't play well. He's like, you know what? I didn't play well and the Caps didn't play well. And I want to address that, especially in regards to how much tickets cost. Oshie had a back procedure, said no surgeries this off season, said he's looking forward to no pain this summer. He said his diet prevents him. And there was a funny moment here from having a 12 pack. He's looking forward to spending more time in Minnesota with his family. Said about Lavi that he feels like he had a tough break as far as injuries are concerned. Says he has faith in Mac, the pressure to impress the new coach. And that was one of the things that I've heard from a lot of the different players around, was wanting to impress the coach, in this case TJ Oshie, is that even though he is an established player, with the Capitals and in the NHL in general, he still has that within him to want to impress. He wants to impress the next coach, to make sure that, he's proving, to everyone that he still has what it takes. It was a funny comment talking about his physical condition, and he kind of looked down at the beat writers, and, he talked about his competitive nature, that no matter what sport he's playing, if it's basketball, if it's football, even with his, friends and relatives, he's the ultimate competitor. He even says, when I'm wrestling, I'm competitive. And then he looked around at the beat writers and he said, what, you guys you don't wrestle anymore? So just kind of a sense of humor and kind of endearing qualities of why people like him. He's a real personable, funny guy. So he would be a tough guy for the Caps to move on. But again, we have to look at the importance of this team's viability in the future. We can't have guys on this team that are just nice to be around. We need players that are going to help contribute to this team. This kind of fading 2018 nucleus that, saw this Caps win a Stanley Cup in 18 is fading. Everyone's getting older, and their productivity, I guess you could say, except for Ovechkin, is dwindling a little bit here. So that is the tough thing, for Oshie. Again, he is a guy that plays much bigger than he is, and the Caps would really miss him on this team. It's my belief, though, that the Caps should pursue, another player. And the problem that the Capitals are in, it's the same thing with Backstrom, is they're already diminished goods. The rest of the NHL knows that TJ Oshie is injury prone. They know that he's seen a decline. So they can read the back of his hockey card. They know what kind of player he is. Will he get a return? Can TJ Oshie still yield a pretty good return in the NHL? Of course he can. But the problem is they probably aren't going to get as much for him now than they would have if they would have traded him a couple years earlier. Let's face it, the Caps didn't make it past the first round since 2018. It really wouldn't have mattered. I know that we didn't have the advantage of hindsight back then, but if we knew that this core it was going to be fading and seeing a lack of productivity, then maybe they would have been wise to move on from a lot of these core pieces than to hang on to them for so long. All right, so after the break here, we're going to weigh out the pros of why TJ Oshie should be on this team. We know he's a great guy in the locker room and great productivity, but what does he bring on the ice? We'll talk about that coming up. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits the first time around. Just add "your ride to my garage" and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. And when you shop at eBay Motors, and with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get to the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers only. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure and follow or subscribe to Locked On Capitals on your podcatcher of choice and on YouTube. I have a lot of great guests lined up for you this summer. I'll also be covering free agency and the draft, so make sure and subscribe to Locked On Capitals today. All right, in this next segment here, we are going to make a case of why the Caps should keep TJ Oshie. I know he is under contract, so it's not like, he's up for to be moving on anyway. He's under contract through the 24-25 season. So it's not like they have to make a decision right now, but should the Capitals make a decision? So for right now, I'm going to start off on why they should keep him here. And there's a lot to like about TJ Oshie. One of the scouts said on him still is a consistent points producer as he moves through his mid 30s, plays much bigger than his size, and is more willing to go to the dirty areas of the ice, especially on the power play. He is among the most successful shootout players in NHL history, as well as being famous for showing for the United States at the 2014 Winter Olympics. So there's a lot to like about Oshie's game. I think that, again, just the intangibles, certain things about being good in the locker room, that kind of thing. But not only that, he is still one heck of a hockey player. In 17-18, Oshie's 21 playoff points placed were instrumental in the Caps winning the Eastern Conference. He tallied 6 points in the Stanley Cup final against the Vegas Golden Knights, ultimately bringing the first Stanley Cup to the nation's capital. So what does Oshie mean for the team? Well, the NHL is business, but sometimes when you've been through so much with someone, it's hard to move on. Some teams feel they owe it to certain players to keep them around, and Oshie very well may fall into that category, especially with only 2 more years left on his deal. Sure, Oshie had his share of struggles last season, but were they genuine? He tallied 35 points in 58 games despite battling injuries all season long, still finishing 6th on the team in points despite missing the final 2 weeks of the regular season with an upper body injury, writes Washington Hockey Now. So that is one of the biggest things about Oshie, is that competitive nature. And that's kind of a thing that you can paint with a broad brush, is even though he's injured, he is still willing to put in the time and the effort to make sure that he is the very best player he possibly can be out on the ice. And that is what is huge for TJ Oshie. And that is one of his most endearing qualities. Off the ice, Oshie has been praised as a teammate, perhaps a key piece for maintaining the team's culture as the Caps approach a crossroads. So, that is the tough thing about Oshie, is that, if it wasn't for the injuries, it wouldn't even really be a conversation. The only conversation piece would be is that he is getting, a bit older. And so that is kind of the difficult part. But I think, if you outweigh the good and the bad, I'm not going to knock his game. I don't think that TJ Oshie has to work on his game per se. I think one of the biggest knocks on him being a Capital in the long term is the injury thing. I'm having a hard time getting past that. Darcy Kemper is also injury prone. Sometimes it's not their fault. The injuries were caused not by their own error. It's just their fault. That's in Darcy Kemper's case. One of the things, kind of to his detriment for Oshie, is that he does play bigger than he is. And being that he does play bigger than he is, oftentimes that is how he gets injured. I remember too, a few years ago when Thornton just ground him right into the sideboards, injured after that. So, I don't think that intrinsically you're going to be able to change TJ Oshie and what kind of player he is. So that is the tough part looking for, going forward here. But just to take a look at his stats, they are still rather well, I got to say. In the 2022-23 season, in 58 games played, he had 19 goals and 16 assists. Not too bad. A year before, 11 goals. The 2021 season, 22 goals. The 19-20 season, 26 goals. The 18-19, 25. So historically, he is a solid contributor to this Caps team. So I hear what you're all saying. I hear it as well. I like TJ Oshie. This is not an anti-TJ Oshie podcast. What this is, however, is just me assessing this team as someone that's a fan of the team at the end of the day and seeing they didn't get what they wanted last season. How are we going to change that next season? How are we going to make this team a winning team next year? And kind of taking a look at the roster and looking at the expendable pieces and taking a look at the NHL at large and seeing the teams that are successful. How are they successful? And for a lot of them, it's younger and faster. We hear it even from the players themselves that everything is getting younger and faster. So I think that the Capitals would be wise to take a look at that. I think that Oshie as a player, as far as what he does on the ice, is good, but his age and his prone to being injured, that is one of his biggest setbacks. All right, so after the break here, we will talk about making a case for moving on from TJ Oshie. It is a difficult conversation to have, but it is one that must be had. We'll be talking about that straight ahead. So one of the things out there is having comfortable clothing as a guy, especially pants. Oftentimes where women wear things that are comfortable, not guys. We're wearing jeans, we're wearing khakis. That is why you need bird dogs. They sent me a pair and I love them. I look better and I feel great wearing bird dogs. They're comfortable. They give me the freedom to wear one pair of shorts pants on the golf course, to a meeting, to meeting friends, to a movie, whatever the case is, in ultimate comfort. Their shorts are comfortable, their pants are comfortable. You need a pair of bird dogs. So go to birddogs.com/locked on NHL. And when you enter promo code locked on NHL, they'll throw in a free custom bird dogs Yeti style tumbler with every order. I got the tumbler. I use it every day. I think you guys will love them as well. So check out Bird Dogs today. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, making a case for trading TJ Oshie, it's not an easy thing as he is under contract through the 24-25 season. You have to deal with the possibility of salary retention. I don't have his no trade teams if he has that in front of me. So, there are a lot of things to consider, but there's always trade partners to be had, especially when it's someone like TJ Oshie, who has a long history in the NHL. And even though he has faced a myriad of injuries, there's a lot of teams out there that could be, in use of his services. So some of those teams that are in transition as well might be willing to move on from a piece to help their team and in turn helping out the Caps. Oshie is regressing hard. The 36-year-old's plus minus has plummeted over the last 3 seasons, with Oshie registering minus 18 in 22-23. His 21-22 season, in which he played 44 games, saw a handful of career lows, including the lowest points per game rate of his 15-year career. He's the second oldest player on the league's oldest team, so Oshie's decline could simply be attributed to his age, but everybody's day comes eventually, and Oshie's could be coming this off season. McClellan has been outspoken about the need to strategically make the team younger, which would obviously require the Caps to cut ties with some players. Forward prospects like Connor McMichael and Hendrix Lapierre, for example, are knocking on the door of Capital One Arena, writes Washington Hockey Now. So that is the tough thing. And for me, unproven commodities in the form of a Hendrix Lapierre and Connor McMichael, we always hear that they are going to be the next latest, greatest thing, and they might be. Connor McMichael is lighting it up down in Hershey, and Hendrix Lapierre has played pretty well. A bit of a bumpier road this past season, but all things considered, the Hershey Bears are in the Calder Cup playoffs and are playing very well, and they're doing that in part due to some of the youth on the team. So taking a look at Oshie as an expendable piece, not because he's not a nice guy, but because he is aging and he's showing signs of regression. He is still a pretty good player, but he is not the TJ Oshie that he was years ago, and he's getting older. So you've got to kind of factor that all in there, and it's a difficult thing as a longtime Cap fan to take a look at someone like TJ Oshie and say, Oshie, it's your time to move on. I have no doubt in my mind that he will find a job somewhere else in the NHL. He is still one heck of a hockey player, but he is showing signs of decline. Still, like I said, at the end of the day, a pretty good hockey player, but I think the Caps would be best served to move on from someone like TJ Oshie if they possibly can find a possible trade offer. Again, I don't think the Capitals should just give him away. I do think, however, they should be willing to pick up the phone and listen and, let's talk to, a GM that's interested in a trade and find out what it would be. For me, I'm not a GM, but if I was, I would have to imagine that it would be TJ Oshie plus someone to equal a big something. I don't think that TJ Oshie in and of himself is going to yield a huge return. But I think that if you bundle TJ Oshie, with another promising player, I think that you could potentially get someone to bolster this team. I mean, you take a look at, for example, when they sent Orlov and Hathaway out, they got that first round pick and Craig Smith and all that. and they traded that first-round pick to Toronto with Eric Gustafsson and got a first-round pick, or excuse me, got Rasmus Sandin in return. And what kind of player is Rasmus Sandin ostensibly going to be? One heck of a player. So if you can kind of take that same logic, let's face it, it was a difficult thing, for me as a longtime Caps fans to see Orlov and Hathaway go out to Boston. I liked Orlov. I followed his career for a long time. I liked Garnet Hathaway's grittiness, kind of, a form of Tom Wilson, but more of a chirper than a fighter. He would be willing to drop the gloves. But it's the return that they got. And that is what I think the Capitals and the Caps fans need to look at as well, is what kind of return can you get for a TJ Oshie? Is it going to help the team in the long term? TJ Oshie, best case scenario, is going to help this team this year, maybe, and maybe the year after that. But his trajectory is already kind of going down like this. So I think that we need to add more players to this team with an upward trajectory. There's going to be a lot of things that are answered this next season. As we know, they're going to be naming a new head coach. That could change a lot of things. Again, I bring this up all the time. If you're an everydayer, that the change that Barry Trotz made to this team got him over the hump to win a Stanley Cup, the first one in franchise history. But that was a different lineup, I mean, the nucleus, some of the players are here, but a lot of those players have moved out as well. So I do think the Caps should explore options on some of these players that they have regarded as, kind of, I don't want to even hear about it. I think a lot of Caps fans, they take a look at Oshie and Backstrom and that, and they're like, well, they'll just play here until they retire. Well, I'm here to tell you that as they get older, they're not going to play better. And as that goes, the Caps will not be playing as well. I don't want to squander the remainder of the Alex Ovechkin era. And to a certain extent, I think that is what would happen if you continue to just keep these older players around. It's easier to just peel that Band-Aid off and get a bigger return and start this team going in the right direction. So when Ovi finally does hang up the skates, they can make those changes that need to be made, and this team can be great. I don't want to wait till Ovi retires to be great. I want this team to be great next season. I want them to be fighting for a Stanley Cup spot next season. I think it's possible, but they're going to have to make some difficult decisions in order to achieve that objective. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals. When you're done listening to this podcast, if you're a fan of other DC sports, head on over to Locked On Nationals, Locked On Commanders, Locked On Wizards. Also, if you're following the Stanley Cup, head on over to Locked On NHL. They've got you covered over there. All right, my name is Dan Holme of Locked On Capitals, where it is your team every day. And I'll talk to you again next time.